text messages allegedly revealed that Dr. Anthony Fauci tried to suppress the Wuhan COVID lab leak theory. Fox News senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram is live on Capitol Hill for us with the details. Hi, Chad.
Jackie, good afternoon. The committee probing the pandemic wants info from Dr. David Morens. Chairman Brad Wenstrup says there are messages alleging that Anthony Fauci tried to curb a narrative about a lab leak starting the pandemic.
I think there's more evidence to say that this came from a lab than anywhere else. There has been no animal found in nature.
Documents obtained by the committee suggest that Fauci did not want his, quote, fingerprints on any narrative about a leak. That was to, quote, tamp down chatter. And documents show that Morens used his personal email to avoid official government transparency. Democrats defend Fauci.
People are saying that the email of the doctor who wanted to use his personal email shows that Tony's fingerprints was on it. Tony's fingerprints aren't on this. We got to be really careful. I am tired of character assassination of many people.
But other top health officials accuse Fauci of scientific spin.
The truth is, and I think the evidence is really pretty clear, the conspiracy here really was on the other side, which was to really get a single narrative to support the spillover event.
One doctor who wrote about the origins of the pandemic missed a deadline today to give the committee his private messages. A hearing is scheduled for mid-July. Jackie?
Chad Pergram, thank you so much. And with us now is the chair of the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Congressman, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Dr. Fauci, from the beginning, did not want to have the conversation around that this leaked from a lab in Wuhan. He was completely against it. And one of the reasons is because the U.S. was funding gain-of-function research, even albeit a small amount of money at the time, in China. And so that was one of the reasons. I mean, eventually these emails will come out and the American public will try to parse through the truth. I know that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, we heard one of my colleagues there saying that Republicans are trying to attack Dr. Fauci. We're just seeking the truth. I mean, I've said from the beginning of this committee that honesty is non-negotiable, but we are obligated to do an investigation, and we are curious as to why certain scientists that work for the government, paid by taxpayer dollars, are going with one narrative when there's all this other information that might suggest a lab leak. Dr. Fauci early on, even back to 2012, was talking about the importance of gain-of-function research. We also know that these types of viruses can be created in the lab because we were doing it with Ralph Barrick in North Carolina and Dr. Zhengli Shi in China at Wuhan. What we're finding, though, is within these emails, the comments that people are making. These are things that we're never supposed to get out, but we're finding out, for example, that Dr. Fauci has been reported in the emails as prompting the proximal origins investigation, which was just an article that said this came from nature. Didn't say anything about the possibility of a lab. The people that wrote that were working with Dr. Fauci. They said he prompted it, and then they said that their job was to focus on disproving the lab leak theory. We're not making these things up. These aren't attacks on Dr. Fauci. They're just the truth of what people are saying. Yeah. And then we get Dr. David Morens, and we got his emails, and he talks about how Dr. Fauci doesn't want his fingerprints on a lab leak, and he's hiding his emails, and he says, I don't use my official because the Freedom of Information Act tries to get them. This is very, very troubling. He says, I'm going to delete a lot of my emails because I don't want them showing up in the New York Times. And he encourages people to go ahead litigation against those that think it came from the lab, and he makes disparaging remarks. And when you start calling people names, that tells me you're out of facts. Yeah. But the question is, what is the motive for these people to not want to have a scientific debate and put all the intelligence out on the table.
Well, he was America's doctor at the time. Everybody was listening to Dr. Fauci. And what ended up happening, this global pandemic that likely started in a lab in China, ended up shutting down the entire world and destroying economies, having long-lasting repercussions. I imagine at the time, he was aware of the severity of this. And I imagine that part of the spin, and when he was sitting on the Hill talking to Rand Paul, not wanting to admit that the NIH did fund the gain-of-function research, that he did not want his fingerprints on this in any way, because it ended up being such a catastrophic event. And not to mention all the people across the world that died.
Yeah, I can understand if you're doing research that could lead to a pandemic, which he admitted could happen. Back in 2012, he said he was asked about it, and he said, I think the risk of that is very low. But he admitted it basically, but that it could happen. And so here we have this pandemic coming from a lab where we know they're doing coronavirus research, where we know that they are capable of making viruses super infectious. And we also know that we were funding coronavirus research in that lab. We also know from the Intel report and many Intel reports, we, I think, have more on the Intelligence Committee than apparently the intelligence community had. But we know about the biosafety being very weak in China. We know they're doing coronavirus research. We know they're doing genetic engineering. And we know that some scientists fell ill there with COVID-like symptoms. I mean, you can't ignore all of these things. These are not attacks on Fauci. We just need to get to the truth. But the real question is, if there is an attack, is why are you ignoring these things?
Yeah, and not only can you not ignore it, you can't lie about it, especially when the stakes are so high. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.